Hi there, my name is Stephanie Falcone. Welcome everyone to the AI Revolution, Transforming Global Business Landscape. I want to give a special welcome to the fellows who are here, the women innovators that made it here to Washington, D.C. I hope that it has been experience of a lot of accommodation and sort of the DC spirit for all of you. And I hear that your week is very packed with a lot more emotion. But today we're gathering with a group of experts that will help us unpack a little bit of what is this revolution and transforming power of AI. Both in the opportunities of it, but also what we should be watching out for as these systems, can have promises and perils, and we should be aware of those. There is a lot of conversation about how the technology is a game changer. Today we'll hear a little bit from the health sector, also from philanthropy, the customer service and hosting sector, and also from the point of view of consulting and more private. And so with that, I want to take a moment to also thank our host, the Atlantic Council. I should introduce myself. I'm Stephanie Falcone, and I am an emerging tech advisor in the technology division at USAID, the Agency of International Development. We have had the pleasure of working with Atlantic Council in the past, both through the AI Connect, which is a program for low and middle income countries to sort of learn about OECD AI principles. And also Atlantic Council Geotech Center helped us with the equitable AI challenge that was challenged by USAID. And we had a community of practice that was launched along with Atlantic Council's Geotech Center, which was very successful. So very grateful on the conversations that they bring, the convening power that Atlantic Council has, and helping us be clear-eyed about these changing landscapes and also how we can influence them. With that, I want to introduce our panelists, and thank you for being here. So. Let me start with, we won't go through the whole bios because we would be here for the entire day, but for the entire hour just reading these. But I will start from Aisha. She is a data and AI manager at Accenture Federal Services. In her role, she oversees data integration across teams in the field of health, setting the stage for advanced analytics and AI tools like large language models. With a wealth of experience spanning over 17 years, she has gained insights into how AI can convert data into intelligence while upholding strict data security and ethical standards. She also, beyond her commitment in her work in AI, she's also a community leader contributing to the Young African Professional Network in Washington, D.C. And she centers her work in advancing the growth of the diaspora communities and fostering engagement through technology-driven networks. So welcome, Aisha. Thank you. Next, we have Jeff, who is head of responsible AI at Booz Allen Hamilton. He is chief AI ethics advisor and also serves on the board of trustees at the Washington Center. Jeff has written and spoken widely about responsible AI, including a series of podcasts with the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. His work has been featured in MIT Technology Review, Fast Company, Ethical Intelligence, Equation Magazine, and more. And he has spoken about transformative future of AI at the University of Virginia and West Virginia, and co-host of Leaders and Responsible AI Summit at Jesus College in Cambridge. Many more experiences, but let me make sure that we get to the next panelist is Chaudhry Lynn, Director of Global Business and Advisory AI at Marriott. She is the Director of Global Business Advisory and the world's largest hotel company. In this role, she leverages her expertise in both technology and business disciplines to identify and capitalize on all AI-driven opportunities for the company. She works closely with cross-sectional teams to uncover problems, devise innovation solutions, and ensure the delivery of exceptional products that truly meet the needs of the organization. She holds a master's degree in international affairs and economics, as well as a bachelor's in Spanish and international business. And throughout her diverse career, she has consistently demonstrated a passion for leveraging cutting-edge technologies to drive meaningful business outcomes. As a director of the Global Advisory, she has also dedicated to pioneering innovation solutions to elevate guest and associate experiences. And last but not least, Wei-Fei. Can I pronounce correctly? Wei-Fei. Is a principal on the responsible technology team at Omidyar Network, where she leads the organization's vision and portfolio on digital trust and safety, and is a member of the generative AI team. Prior to Omidyar Network, Wei-Fei served as a consultant at the International Finance Corporation, where she managed an open innovation challenge to advance AFC's financial inclusion agenda. She has spent some time at the United Nations Office of High Commissioner and at the United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization. She's also a member of the Council of Foreign Affairs and has served as a co-chair of the World Economic Forum Global Futures Council and Human Rights. Oh, I was there with the Agile Governance Council a few years ago. JD from the University of Denver and a Stern College of Law, and a BA in Political Science, Public Law for the University of California, San Diego, where she also served as the student body president. So with that, thank you. Thank you for being here and for engaging us in this conversation. And I want to open with a, sort of a more open and general question on how you see AI currently transforming your specific industry. And if you could have a little bit of foresight, what do you expect might be the most significant changes in the next 5 years? And this is open, so anybody who wants to jump in, please do.
You want to start?
I can start off, okay. Sure. So thank you so much for having us to the Atlantic Council, and thank you all for being here as well. I've heard all about your experience. You're basically the creme de la creme when it comes to entrepreneurs in the Middle East, so congratulations, and I'm really happy to see all of you here. I guess I'll start by a very quick introduction of what Omidyar Network actually does. So we're a philanthropic social good venture. What that means is that we make a variety of different grants and investments, both nonprofit and for-profit investments, to individuals working along 3 main areas of work. So the first is responsible technology, which is where I sit. The second is reimagining capitalism, and the third is building cultures of belonging. Now, to answer your question, I think it would be helped by sharing how at Omidyar once, we've always kind of worked on a variety of different responsible AI types of initiatives, but last summer when ChatGPT was essentially unleashed on everyone, we kind of had to take a very interesting approach to how we make these kinds of grants. And we decided that instead of creating a vertical on generative AI, that we would infuse different AI elements into every single one of our arms. And we called this a whole of Omidyar network approach. This is very different because it really kind of brings our existing arms into one fold and has AI thread between all of them. And that reflects an acknowledgement that ultimately generative AI is, we believe, one of the biggest technologies to come to humanity since the Industrial Revolution. But it can't really serve its promise without kind of bending that technology to the values that we have. We think that society should be guiding the principles along which this technology is developed, deployed, and used to benefit humanity, as opposed to having technology lead us in the other direction. We also believe that ultimately, this necessitates a more holistic understanding of how we make those grants and investments. So we took on a more holistic type of approach where we look at a variety of different layers of the stack. So looking at everything from the design to the development to the eventual deployment of this technology, and then also creating a variety of different guardrails from civil society, academics, other types of scientists that really help ensure that this technology is helping guide us in a direction that can benefit humanity. And so it really has been groundbreaking for us insofar as how we make our grant making. But I'm really looking forward to kind of engaging on a variety of different elements on it to make sure that it is serving the purpose that we want it to.
Perfect.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Shoju. So I'm going to talk about it from sort of the industry perspective, right? So far I've done AI work in two specific industries. One is financial services or banking, and then the other one is the travel industry, which I'm currently in right now. So I think how an organization or how an entity really approaches AI is really up to your maturity when it comes to your adoption of technology, right? So to give you a quick example, in banking and financial services, there are a lot of companies out there that have been doing machine learning modeling for many years. So like companies like JP Chase, which has over 2,000 employees dedicated to AI, and then companies like Capital One, which is a big data company that uses a lot of sort of machine learning technologies to predict fraud, to translate the way that your transactions are coming through, right? So these companies are really well positioned to take advantage of generative AI, especially given the latest advent of large language models, right? So I think that because of this, we're seeing these companies really very into sort of using generative AI to improve productivity. And that exists in things like software engineering, right? For example, JP Chase, a huge like technology investor, right? So they have a large workforce that's already dedicated to technology, right? Software engineers, and they are probably, I'm just kind of making an assumption here, they're probably looking at using generative AI to write better coding, right? To program better. And then I'm going to talk about the other industry that I'm currently in right now, which is the travel industry. So the travel industry traditionally isn't really known to be super technology driven unless you're one of those like online booking sites, right? Like Kayak, Airbnb, Expedia, right? So like we saw that these companies actually came out with the earliest generative AI announcements that said, okay, Expedia signed this like big contract with the OpenAI, and they're going to make your trip search or trip booking experiences better, right? Because they're well positioned and mature enough to actually take advantage of these opportunities. However, traditionally, I think when it comes to like hotel companies, right, like there's a lot of sort of pre-work you have to do before you can actually take advantage of AI. So things like cleaning up your data sets, like knowing where your data actually live, right? And but I think like once these companies are ready, they can look at opportunities in sales and marketing, customer service, right? So I think those are like really great sort of avenues to explore. And then I'll just offer this statistic really quickly. So on an aggregate, like global economy level, right? McKinsey is predicting that generative AI is going to create 2.6 trillion to 4.4 trillion of revenue on an annual basis. So think about the pie, or like the really big pie there, right? Like opportunities that you can take advantage of. And there are multiple like many industries within sort of that big prediction where you can leverage AI. So I would definitely kind of encourage everyone to really think about like what is going to align to your industry when it comes to AI adoption. Is your organization mature and ready enough to take advantage of it? If so, in what ways?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I also think that one is maturity, but also who the end user is. I think very different here, right? You're talking about people that are booking trips, people that are going out on vacations. I think in this case, in philanthropy case, or in USAID as well, the end user is very different, and then what those decisions lead to, or what the AI system is helping us decide on could have very different implications. So definitely, yeah, I hear that. Jeff, do you want to go next, and then hopefully we can.
Yeah. I love this question. I love this focus on transformation. Let me talk about a barrier to transformation. And I think the barrier is that with Gen AI in particular, we're treating this as a top-down technology when it's really a bottoms-up technology. And what do I mean by that? Our instinct always, when a new technology comes out, particularly with AI, is to centralize it within our own organizations. We'll have an AI shop, an AI division, and we'll hire specific AI experts to come and staff that division. Makes sense on the surface. The problem is, with Gen AI, it is so idiosyncratic to our own habits and work roles and jobs and tasks. And so how I'm going to use ChatGPT, for instance, and how it's going to augment my role is going to be really different than how it's going to augment yours. All of us have unique superpowers. We all have unique responsibilities within the context of our organization. And so one blanket generative AI, instance and provisioning and, playbook is going to fall flat. And so instead of understanding or treating Gen AI like another enterprise technology that we're going to roll out in the same play and manage in the same way, what we're really trying to do is spark, I think, 1,000 sort of bits of inspiration across the workforce. And put this in the hands of as many people as possible, because they're going to be the ones on the front lines of the business that are going to understand the best ways to customize it to their own unique work and preferences, and are going to figure out kind of the unique ways to basically turbocharge it for the business outcomes that they're trying to drive. And so there are a couple things to sort of wrap that idea up that you can and should do as an organization in that more centralized way. First of all, someone's got to provision, ChatGPT for business, and we certainly want to wrap the right guardrails and controls around this technology so that we're not leaking proprietary secrets, et cetera. But otherwise, I think the idea is let's get this into the hands of as many people as possible and see what bubbles up from the employee base. And I think that's how we really accelerate transformation.
I'll actually add to that. So I'm in the public sector, working with a consulting company that works with the federal government. And to your point of getting it in the hands of folks as well as the maturity, I think that's a really crucial piece, right? We go in with the sense that this is all new for all of us. So it's a holistic, project that we will engage with our clients. So this means upskilling not only our employees, which a lot of companies are doing. We have now chief AI officers in the private sector, as well as Biden had his new executive order, and then OMB pushed out the sort of implementation guidance, basically saying that, get your chief AI officers in place, assess the risks, identify where you're using AI, how you're using it, how you're evaluating it. And so there's different maturity levels that are happening across all industries, but particularly in the public sector, our end users want to trust us, want to ensure that there's a sense of accountability. And so we need to embed that in all the levels of the end-to-end. And so I come from the data side of the house, right? And so we think about the sources of data that we're using. OpenAI uses the internet, right, to train their models. Well, in the federal or public sector, we can't necessarily use that same. So going to the point of looking at the data sets, how are we preparing that? How the environment that we're using, cybersecurity is a concern. Biases throughout the end-to-end. So not just biases in how we evaluate the data, but biases inherent in the source of data. Because this is, it's only as good, there's, expressions, garbage in, garbage out, So, we have to consider all the sort of elements. And so we holistically work with our clients to ensure that the maturity, we understand where we are and where we're going, and that everybody is learning what this technology means for their workflow responsibilities.
Since we touched on the question of, on the bottom-up, top-down, and I think there's a little bit of thread here on like what sector you're in, what is the maturity, what is the data set that you need, and what are the consequences of using AI systems. I wonder if we can, again, take a step back and look at, do you see AI playing a role, and if so, what, in sort of these larger social challenges or questions that we have in front of us, and certainly in the region that the fellows come from, but I mean, we can talk about the challenges that we're facing here at home as well. So if we can take a step back on what is the role, if any, of AI in addressing some of these challenges.
So I think if you're talking about sort of challenges that humanity is facing as a whole, right? Like obviously, there's no shortage of problems that we're dealing with on a daily basis. But I think what AI sort of is becoming the enabler of is that if you look at a lot of these issues, right, let's take sustainability as an example. So sustainability, basically, the definition is that you are trying to figure out if you have enough resources to sustain your future generations' needs given your current consumption rates, right? So that actually becomes a prediction problem. So when you're looking at prediction issues or problems, that AI is incredibly good at, right? Because it's good at parsing through large amounts of data, right? So it's good at ingesting this data, find common patterns, and identify scenarios or sort of model these scenarios which you can use to kind of predict, okay, like do we have enough like food resources, for example, for the future, right? So I think that's absolutely a resounding yes to sort of AI playing a role in handling these challenges. But I think the bigger question here is like we actually have to ask us, what are we going to do with these predictions, right? So because we know that humans are notorious at making policies for tomorrow, for the future, given sort of the current information that we have. So I think this is like something that I've like always sort of thought about in the back of my mind. I don't have an answer for this, but I like to point out is that yes, AI is going to help us unlock all these capabilities, help us unlock all these insights about the future, but what are we actually doing with that?
So I'd love to build on that because that resonates with me a lot. I think AI is the greatest public policy making tool we've ever invented. And why do I say that? We all know that AI can be biased, and of course it is. It's based on human data. We are inherently biased, therefore AI is going to be inherently biased. But there's a phrase, never waste a good crisis, and I think we are wasting the utility of bias. And as an example, at one point in time, we didn't know that zip code was a proxy for race. We just didn't know that. And then we got a bunch of data together in one place, and that correlation became clear. And I think that's a really good example of how complex and nuanced bias manifests across society. And if we don't understand a problem, we can't solve it. So we haven't solved housing and discrimination by any means. But we know a lot more about it now and with greater precision. And that is a requirement to effective public policy interventions. And so AI is really, really good at surfacing bias with precision and context and specificity. So imagine that at scale, how much insight we stand to gain about the problems across our society with enough context and specificity to actually solve them with greater effectiveness. And so I know it's a little counterintuitive. We expect AI to be perfect, but really we should be looking at AI to help us make our own society a little bit more perfect.
I agree. I'll also build on that very briefly. I think that like what you're discussing is using AI as a tool to help us understand the problems that we face as humanity and help people in public service be able to access data in a way that is more efficient and gives greater insights in a shorter amount of time. I think what AI could be used for as a customer-facing kind of technology is in a lot of our governments. I mean, a lot of our bureaucracies are just not that efficient. I think ultimately having generative AI help public citizens and residents of a certain jurisdiction be able to interact with their governments in a more efficient manner. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a case that is in a specific administrative system and you have a history of engaging with that administrative body over time. What AI can do is help kind of bring all of that history in one conversation and be able to guide you in the right direction, whether it's insofar as looking at what law you should be looking at or what administration you should be directed towards. That is just an unleveled type of unparalleled level of transparency and accountability for governments as well that citizens could have. I would caution governments against one thing, though, and I think just a couple of days ago, the Prime Minister of France announced that they would be using AI in public service, which is great. But I would caution against using it in very risky types of environments or contexts, and those include things like access to justice. They include AI in a decision-making capability when it comes to insurance-related decisions or Social Security types of benefit decisions, or even cases of criminal justice. I think those are the more risky and I think kinds of contexts that governments could do well to focus more on the back-end applications of generative AI and harness the power of it in service of its citizens before looking at those riskier areas. And I think just kind of I've been speaking about this specific type of risk for almost 5 years now. And back then it was more of like a theoretical risk. But now we actually see some examples of AI being used in ways because the data is not very good and because we have these biases. And unfortunately, we're not capitalizing on the bad data to make use of a good crisis and actually address the problematic existing inequities. I think I would just caution against kind of looking at those areas first.
So a lot of discussion about biases, a lot of discussion about how to streamline certain capabilities of AI. Aisha, I don't know, from your wealth of experience in the health sector, anything that stands out to you?
Well, I'm excited. Well, I'm excited for a number of reasons. So we just came out of this global pandemic, right? And I don't know, Jeff, you were bringing this up, or maybe I was thinking ahead.
It's probably that.
It's probably that. But in the past, we would use studies, looking at past data to predict the future, right? So I'm excited about the sort of real-time analysis that you can do, and we've talked about predictive analytics too, and I'm sure folks know AI is being used to help diagnose cancers, certain diseases, but I in particular am excited about how it might be used in some people may know this terminology, syndronic surveillance. So thinking about disease outbreaks, thinking about the next future, hopefully not, pandemic. How are we going to use the sort of data that exists all out there in the world? And so syndronic looks at things like your pharmaceutical purchases, clinical visits, electronic medical records, and pulls all that sort of information together, analyzes it, and puts out insights on things like, let's say there were huge purchases in anti-fever, anti-diarrhea medicine. And so the insights might tell you or inference that a certain locality has an uptake, meaning that maybe there's some kind of disease or something going on in that area. And so when we combine that use with, we can't leave the human out, obviously. That's powerful. I'll give an example. For example, the Ebola crisis in 2014. My husband worked on that, on the technology side. And this is, I think you talked about crisis management, right? Real time, AI can help you summarize this information. So they had heat maps, they had all this information pointing out to certain areas, but one thing he did point out to me, and it's crucial, and I go back to this all the time, how we evaluate the data, is that we needed the local context, right? We needed people with local context to actually formulate and help support the analysis so that we could get to a point of identifying truly interventions that were unique to the local context. And so, yes, AI is essential in helping to streamline and enhance public services, but there's some elements that we need to consider with it, right? That rightfully the whole panel basically brought up. And then on top of that, I hope we can even talk about, capacity building across, government, the different layers of government, because there's certain investments that certainly need to happen.
Follow up on that, but later.
Yeah.
No, actually, I want to circle back here because I think there's so much of this conversation that focuses on data and technology and the advancements and algorithms and all the precise ways that we're making this better and bigger and scale, and we often forget one component of these systems, which is people. Mm-hmm. So I think every single one of you have touched on people. We're going to have great predictions. What are we going to do with them? We're going to have, ability to know where the next outbreak is, but what is the local context, and who are we, verifying and contextualizing and ground truthing this with? And so, let's talk about people.
Can I actually build on something that you both mentioned that I absolutely loved? I love that you said that we have to start from the ground up and see what bubbles up. And you were talking about it in a different context, and then you were talking about different communities, and they were, listening to those communities and actually making sure that the technology responds to the local context that it's currently being deployed in. That is a great point from both of you, because ultimately it showcases that tech companies, as well as government bodies that use generative AI or predictive analytics or other types of machine learning technologies, really need to be involved in different types of inclusive participation of different communities. And I think I just wanted to very quickly elucidate what that looks like. So there are three main points I want to hit here in terms of what inclusive participation looks like. The first would be outside in. So you're bringing communities to developers to discuss what kinds of harms they're seeing and experiencing and how it impacts them. You're looking at different types of communities because ultimately tech companies would benefit from listening to these communities, because when you design a technology for those that are most marginalized and or vulnerable, you are actually lifting all boats for society. It is just best practice for any company to do that. The second would be actually doing the inside out. So making sure that those involved in the development of the technology itself come from diverse backgrounds, and that you have a staff that you all are women business leaders. Ultimately, you would also benefit from an opportunity to have diverse members of your staff that are able to really understand these harms and issues and needs of why generative AI should be applied to your business. That helps your bottom line, actually. And then the third would be having a consistent feedback loop between those two communities. So I'm a human rights attorney, and one thing that we've always been discussing is human rights impact assessments. The thing is that human rights impact assessments don't just end when you publish a report and give it to a company. In fact, there needs to be a consistent feedback loop, because as the technology advances and as new features are added to products, that changes the potential ramifications and impact of that technology on specific communities. So throughout the process, you need to have very consistent feedback loops of outside in, inside out, and be able to encourage that kind of inclusive participation, whether you are government, whether you are a private sector business, especially those that are developing these technologies, from a point of view of trust and safety, from public health, for even the well-being of a financial and economical ecosystem. That's just the best practice moving forward.
I'd love to share a thought on what happens if we don't do that.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the United States in particular, for it's crazy, closing in on a decade now, we've been seeing a rise in populism, anger, dissatisfaction. And I was confused by that for a long time. I'm a huge policy nerd. I'm like, go country, what's going on here? And then if you really zoom out and take a step back, it actually becomes quite clear. Like if you imagine the average touch point of the average citizen in the country, it's with the government, it's pretty terrible. DMV, IRS, potholes, healthcare, et cetera. So it's no wonder that there's anger. So I think looking at where we can really harness these technologies to make those services, that support to these communities, to citizens, et cetera, better, more effective, more efficient, actually serving their needs, we can help restore trust, we can help take government into the next generation, and we can actually restore some of that social fabric that I think we've been losing over the last 3 or 4 decades. And I think that we have unique considerations in the States, but that applies to everybody's country. There's a broken social fabric to some degree in some way in all of the countries that we come from right now. And I think, I know it's a little grand to say this, but I think AI can actually make a difference if we use it in the right way and really understand what those ways are.
I want to make sure we leave time for our questions from the audience, but I do want to give a chance for the other 2 folks if you have anything to add to that.
I think, well, the first thing that just popped to my head, going back to education. So I personally feel that we're, at least in the US, we're behind in the education of a number of technologies, right? And so it's a catch-up. We're trying to catch up. And so when we talk about the involvement of individuals with technology, our high schools, our universities, people are using the technology without any sort of bounds, or I don't think any full understanding of what they're getting into and what the ramifications are. So we're talking at a high level about government, about the touch points, about public service, but on the ground level, the average person does not fully understand. They know about disinformation to a certain extent, fake news, that an AI image has, 3 fingers, so something's wrong. But beyond that, and then, to a certain extent, there's scams happening. But beyond that, they're not actually fully educated. There's not a full sort of awareness campaign going on about this new technology. And I think we're really missing that piece of bringing individuals into the fold of what they're going to eventually be benefiting from and how to interact with it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's a really good point because I think all 3 of you actually touched on the fact that using AI technologies will create all of these risky externalities, right, of these scenarios that we didn't really think of before, and how do we get ahead of kind of predicting these scenarios, not to keep using that word, but how do we actually make sure that the pursuit of this technology is both responsible, ethical, right? So one of the things that I often think about when I look at large language models or these foundation models, right, is there a level of explainability that exists in its data sets? Is there transparency in terms of how these large language model companies are training their models, right? So I'll give you a quick example. So we all know ChatGPT, right? But then a lot of people also know Anthropic's Cloud, right? So Cloud is also a large language model. It's kind of responsible AI forward, right? It talks about how do you scale large language models in responsible ways, right? So one of the things that they do really well is that they publish a monthly kind of a blog on AI alignment. So for those of you that haven't heard of this term before, so alignment is when you make sure that AI systems are aligned to human values and are serving humans in beneficial ways, right? So that's incredibly difficult to define. But I think at a very basic level, we have some ideas, right? So they publish these like articles on how they're aligning their kind of AI systems to these goals, which I find really refreshing. I think like a lot of us still don't really know the full extent of the risks and sort of the bad externalities associated with these foundation models, but I think we have some great places to start.
Well, I want to thank you. And we have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. And I see a few hands coming up. Are we getting mics, or are people just standing up? And okay. So you can come up to the mic with your question, and we'll try to address. How about we do 2 of them at a time, so that if people want to. And I also see a hand here if she wants to come and share her question. Yeah, let's do 2 of them at a time. And thank you for participating.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Ms. Aisha. How can the use of AI in health conflict with the patient right policies?
A little bit louder. It's difficult to hear.
How can the use of AI conflict with the patient right policy? Use of AI, how can it conflict with the patient right policies?
Oh, it can.
How can we use it
So
in this case?
So we talked a little bit about this, regulatory frameworks. So in the U.S., in a lot of different places in the public sector, when we're trying to deploy AI, we are faced with navigating a lot of regulatory frameworks. And so, to your answer, I think this is evolving. I think, governments are trying to understand more how they can safeguard the data in those risks. They are advising, they're asking for data governance frameworks to, look at the end-to-end, so that they can better assess how they're going to deal with sensitive data, or personal privacy concerns. And so it's evolving. I think from a day-to-day sort of standpoint, I think we're going to see more cybersecurity enhancements around. And as we see it evolving in the public space, it's going to actually be, I think, more beneficial for even the private sector in a lot of ways, because more regulation is going to happen in the space. So we're very much in the infancy. So I don't think there's an answer quite to that right yet.
There is no governance control.
There's governance controls that are starting. But I think they're going to be evolving over time.
I think there is good governance control and data privacy when it comes to patient information and rights, right?
Yeah.
So I think one way to look at it is you have to classify the level of risks that you're willing to take with your AI systems, right? So if we're talking about high risk scenarios, I want to put in all this data to come up with a diagnosis for my patient, I need to have a human in the loop. Right, and then in a very general sense for health, I think there's a lot of really good R&D opportunities out there, right? So actually, I think McKinsey has really good research on this, and also ChatGPT just published how they're working with Moderna to really uplift their R&D capabilities. I think they just put it on their website, so take a look. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, we have a microphone, so if anybody who wants to ask a question.
She wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you think AI can replace humans, especially in publishing?
Publishing. Question. Can AI replace humans, especially or specifically in the publishing sector?
I think, first of all, amazing question.
Yeah.
I think I'll start with publishing and then sort of zoom out. I think technically it can, but I think what we're seeing is humans don't really want to read news or articles written by machines. There's just something that's not quite there. It's not, even if we don't know it was written by a machine, you can just sort of tell in your gut that there's something stale about this. And it's not the purpose of what that writing is meant to do. It doesn't move us. I think we will see it contribute to publishing in certain ways. I think writing breaking news headlines that flash up on your phone, I think that's a really good use case. We don't need to be moved like Shakespeare when the Financial Times says some event happened somewhere. But for most of publishing, what we want to read and be moved by in an artistic way, as much as I actually worry about AI replacing jobs, I'm not sure I worry as much in that particular domain. But I do think we underestimate the number of jobs that will be impacted. And we should worry more about it so that we take more proactive steps to do something about it. It's not a foregone conclusion, but it will be if we sleepwalk into it.
Thank you so much, Junior Innovation Fellow. And if could we do two at a time? We are coming close on our time, so I want to make sure we get a couple of questions if you have them. Yeah, come on up to the mic. We'll do two questions at a time so that the panelists have a chance to either consolidate.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to build on what she asked, because I work in AI for mental health. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have is regulation, right? Like how do we regulate AI and how do we use it in the best way? And there are ways that we are already putting to work, as case studies to see, how do we set up our AI in a walled garden so that the information that we are sharing with the AI is not actually stored within the data sets that they have. So, this is just for general knowledge, and I think it needs a big discussion on how we can do these things more. But I just wanted to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm actually just going to build on the previous question. So how do you suggest companies navigate the delicate balance between leveraging AI, which is for innovation, but also managing the potential socioeconomic impacts that it will have? And secondly, my question is for you, Aisha. When you speak about education, I think that's really the fundamental. We're looking at a technology that is, being developed at the speed of light, literally. And education is fundamental to help close that knowledge gap so that more adoption happens. I'm specifically building now a social innovation hub for women to help close the tech divide gap between women and men, and to help enable more women to use these emerging technologies in their companies. So how do you suggest that I go about doing that, given that these resources are changing by the day, and I think knowledge is really fundamental for growth? So your insight would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Can we get one more, and then we can have the panelists address?
Okay, I just retired from the Foreign Service, going to be teaching international business soon.
Can you bring it up so we can hear you?
Okay, yeah, just retired from the Foreign Service, going to be teaching international business soon. To get back to the title of today's event on the global business landscape, how would you describe the risks of implementing AI solutions from other places and opportunities for AI solutions throughout the world? And just thinking about things like facial recognition from China, who knows what the Russians are doing with military technologies. And on the opportunity side, I know other countries are trying to explore and develop their own AI solutions, France and Asia and so on. How would you assess the business aspects of AI and risks and opportunities?
I can answer that very briefly in 30 seconds. I know we have a minute left. I think this goes back to my original point about having the technology follow our values as opposed to the other way around. Like, what's happening in China is very worrisome because ultimately there is a very little semblance of personal information or sensitive information, or PII essentially, that really allows certain technologies to get ahead while violating user privacy. And I think ultimately what we have to do is to have to disaggregate what public types of data look like and how they could be shared in an open data type of framework, as opposed to private data that harms Americans or harms other individuals in these countries that do believe that individuals are entitled to fundamental civil liberties or human rights. And so how do we kind of get the right regulatory frameworks and guardrails to ensure that that technology is being done appropriately? So I think I took like 30 seconds. So
And on the question of education and
Yeah,
question.
I mean, I think AI in itself is a useful tool for the education piece, right? AI is being used to create adaptive learning that's personalized and unique to individuals, which I wish I could have had when I was younger. We all learn differently, right? And so I think there's a use case with the tool itself, with using that in sort of education to kind of democratize, education so that larger groups of people can have access to it. And I mean, I think there are bodies forming, and organizations forming to kind of help with this digital divide, because we can even broaden it, right? Expand it further with this new technology, which we don't want to do. So I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa. And so I often think about and am involved in a lot of activities in the diaspora space where we're always trying to go home and support it and grow our economies in different ways. And so, helping on that educational piece, mentoring, connecting with tech startups back home that have a sort of educational wing to build up more coders, to build up more data scientists is a movement that is happening and needs actually more support and investment globally, So, I think there's a couple different ways of hitting that, yeah.
Sorry, I do want to kind of come back to one thing though. So I think fundamentally AI is an enabler, it's a technology, right? But what you do with it has to be very specific to your user needs. So one thing that I advise the people that come to me for AI investment advice. So one thing I always say is before you even solution your problem with me with AI. Tell me exactly what problem are you trying to solve, right? Because sometimes that problem could probably be solved by other means. It doesn't need to leverage AI technology. So I think when it comes to kind of the pursuing educational or upskilling opportunities, you'll take a look at your industry. You take a look at the customers that you're surveying. What are the pain points that you can resolve with AI? And then go from there, because then that's going to allow you to specialize in a specific field that's going to offer you greater ROI in your pursuit of AI, right? Because it's too grand of a subject right now to just like go from the very fundamentals of like how large language models are built to like the very specific scenarios. So just make sure that like there is focus and alignment.
So to everyone online, I want to thank you for your time. And for those that are here in the room, the speakers are still, I'm sure will be happy to take a question or two before they head out. Thank you so much for joining us. And in the spirit of the title of transformation, I hope that we've learned today that transformation is something that we can make happen and is not happening to us. And technology or no technology involved. So thanks so much.